battle against the invasive wild hogs in Texas is not fought only out on the open fields with rifles. It truly begins inside the farmer's workshop. As the wild hogs grow increasingly cunning and their population multiplies at an alarming rate, small homemade traps are no longer enough to stop them. To fully protect the fruits of his labor, Nick realizes he needs a larger, more professional campaign. That is why he decides to upgrade his entire arsenal, from high-tech smart traps to specialized transport equipment, turning a spontaneous hunting effort into a well-organized, efficient, and systematic operation. Realizing that his old homemade cage traps could no longer handle the growing problem, Nick makes a major investment. He orders a massive next-generation smart cage trap equipped with a remote-controlled automatic triggering system, which is delivered directly to his... However, even the biggest trap is useless without a suitable way to transport capture hogs. Nick begins an ambitious mechanical project, building a specialized wild hog transport trailer from an old trailer frame. For days, the sound of welding echoes through his workshop as sparks fly, while he carefully reinforces the steel frame and welds heavy-duty metal bars into place. The work demands tremendous patience, from welding load-bearing joints to designing a convenient drop gate that allows the hogs to enter the trailer but prevents them from breaking back out. After the final coats of rust-resistant paint are applied, the massive transport trailer is finally complete and ready to roll into the field. Fully equipped with his upgraded gear, Nick begins deploying traps across the hardest-hit areas. Every trap inspection now becomes a moment of anticipation. The first trap, positioned along the forest edge, successfully triggers and captures the first group of destructive intruders. Moving on to the neighboring valley, the second trap delivers another major success by blocking the path of another sounder of wild hogs. As expected, the third trap, placed in a dense grassland area, is also packed with captured hogs, proving just how effective Nick's upgraded trapping system has become. However, no matter how effective cage traps are, there are always a few old, experienced boars that refuse to enter them. To finish the campaign once and for all, Nick shoulders his rifle and teams up with his seasoned hunting dogs to track down the remaining animals. Under the scorching Texas sun, the dogs bark relentlessly as they corner their target. With a single precise shot, Nick brings down the last massive wild hog, completely eliminating the threat to his cornfields. The campaign ends not only with peace restored to the ranch, but also with a well-earned reward on the dinner table. Nick transports all the harvested wild hogs back to the processing area. With a sharp knife and practiced skill, he carefully butchers the animals, separating the finest, leanest cuts of meat, ready to be transformed into delicious meals for family and friends. Taking a refreshing sip of cold beer beside the smoky charcoal grill, Nick gazes across the cornfields that are finally safe once again. The greatest lesson from this campaign is that in the battle against nature, a farmer needs more than strength. Success requires investment, practical engineering, scientific thinking, and self-reliance. Turning a destructive pest into a valuable source of nutritious food is how Texas farmers adapt, survive, and assert their stewardship over the land they call home. That night, I set up 2 cage traps in 2 different areas around the farm. One was placed right at the edge of the forest, where footprints and signs of rooting damage frequently appear. The other was set along a narrow trail leading out to the field, a route they often used to forage at night. Everything was carefully prepared, from the bait to the trigger mechanism. After a final check, I left and relied entirely on the surveillance camera in the darkness. The next morning, the first thing I did was review the footage. What I saw surprised me. At the first trap, around midnight, 3 adult wild boars appeared. They moved very cautiously, constantly sniffing around the cage. After a few minutes of inspecting, one of them stepped inside to eat the bait. The moment it moved deep enough in, the door slammed shut instantly. The other 2 panicked and immediately ran back into the forest. Switching to the second trap, things happened much faster. Only 1 boar appeared, but it seemed far less cautious. Almost immediately, it walked straight into the cage, and the trap snapped shut within seconds. No hesitation, no chance to escape. After watching the entire recording, I immediately gathered my tools and got into the pickup truck to check the site. As I approached, I could already hear loud banging coming from inside the trap. The boar in the first cage was still very strong, repeatedly ramming into the metal bars, trying to break free. It was larger than I had expected, and clearly, handling it would not be simple. I approached carefully, keeping a safe distance before securing the cage to prevent it from tipping over or being damaged. Once everything was stabilized, I moved to the second trap. The boar there was just as aggressive, but the tighter space made it harder for it to move compared to the first one. The next step was loading both cages onto the truck. This was the most time-consuming and physically demanding part. With the heavy weight of the boars and the steel cages, I had to use ropes and even the truck's power to pull them up onto the bed. Every move had to be calculated carefully. One small mistake could lead to injury or a broken trap. After securing both cages firmly on the truck, I quickly left the area and returned to the farm. After dealing with the 2 traps from the previous night, I didn't stop. Signs of wild boars were still present around the area, especially in the orchard behind the farm and a low-lying patch not far from there. This time, I decided to set 2 more traps, but during the daytime when they would be less suspicious. The first trap was placed right in the fruit orchard. This is where wild boars often come to dig and destroy, especially when the fruit begins to ripen. The second trap was a completely different situation. I brought it to a low-lying area where water collects, creating a muddy, damp terrain. This is a place wild boars frequently visit to find water and cool themselves. By late afternoon, everything was ready. I left and waited for the results. Clearly, the number of wild boars in this area is not small, and what I had just seen was only part of the problem. I started by placing the trap directly along the clearest trail the herd regularly used. The steel cage was secured tightly, and bait was carefully scattered deeper inside, step by step, to make everything feel as natural as possible. Everything had to be perfect, because even the smallest unusual sign would keep them from entering. As night fell, the area sank into silence. But not long after, the herd appeared. They followed the scent of food and slowly moved into the trap. Then the gate slammed shut. The sound echoed sharply through the darkness. Instantly, the entire herd erupted into chaos, crashing violently inside the cramped space, desperately searching for a way out. The next morning, we couldn't afford to wait any longer. As soon as daylight broke, the whole team headed straight for the trap location. Even from a distance, we could already hear the noise coming from inside. As we approached, the wild boars were still reacting aggressively. Without wasting time, we immediately began the collection process, controlling each step carefully to remove the entire group quickly and decisively. The next trap was placed right along the forest edge, an area where the wild boars regularly emerged each night to feed. Everything was prepared quickly before we left, allowing the trap to sit quietly in the darkness. That night, the trap was triggered. The next morning, the moment I returned, I realized the situation was far more serious than the previous captures. The number of wild boars packed inside was enormous. They filled the entire cage, shoving against one another, moving violently, constantly slamming into the steel frame. The atmosphere instantly became tense. There were simply too many. We needed a way to handle them quickly and efficiently. A bulldozer was brought in, slowly approaching the trap while the herd inside continued thrashing violently. Every movement had to be calculated carefully. One group at a time, they were loaded onto the transport vehicle. The third trap was placed along the western edge of the forest, where the herd frequently traveled out to feed before returning deeper into the woods. After everything was set, I left the trap overnight, and just as expected, they entered and triggered it under the cover of darkness. The next morning, when I returned, the situation was obvious immediately. Inside, the herd was trapped tightly together, moving frantically within the confined space. This time, there were no machines to assist us. Everything had to be done manually. I handled it one step at a time, carefully, decisively. There was no room for mistakes. Each animal was controlled and collected by hand. It took far longer, but it ensured everything stayed under control. When the final boar was removed from the trap, silence slowly returned to the area once again. Another location completed exactly as planned. The fourth trap was placed deep inside a clearing surrounded by dense pine forest, a hidden location enclosed by thick rows of trees. Everything was prepared carefully before we left. But this time, the night camera malfunctioned, meaning none of the events during the night were recorded. The next morning, when we returned, the atmosphere already felt different. Even from far away, I could sense something was wrong. And as we approached the trap, the sight in front of us genuinely stopped me cold. Inside were not ordinary wild boars. These were massive animals, huge bodies, heavy movements filled with raw power. The trap itself looked smaller than ever as they shoved against its steel frame. Every movement created deep, heavy sounds echoing through the silent forest. When the final trap was finally cleared, the forest slowly returned to its natural silence. Looking back at everything that had happened, I knew this was no ordinary trapping operation. From massive herds to gigantic individuals hidden deep inside the woods, everything revealed one thing clearly. This area was far more complex than anything I'd faced before. We managed to regain control, but it was obvious. This would not be the last time.